Today we'll be assembling a chair kit, making a no-sew apron, and filling a vintage bowl with green beans to make this sweet country kitchen decor. I have a Bond kit here. This is made out of polystyrene. It's a type of paintable plastic. I'll put a link to my favorite Dollhouse store in the description below where you can buy this kit. I like to start by cleaning it with rubbing alcohol. I don't know if it's necessary, but in case there's some mold release on the plastic, I like to give it a wipe down before I paint it. I'm just using regular acrylic paint to paint the chair. A tip for when you're painting these, you want to make sure you avoid the tabs where you will be inserting glue to attach the pieces. So I didn't put paint anywhere where two pieces will be glued together. I find it easier to paint the pieces while they're still attached to the sprue, but you can assemble the chair first and paint after. The seat is a faux cane look, and I'm painting mine a creamy color. You could call this done, but I want to bring out all of those nice details, so I'm just going to give it a quick dry brushing with a light paint. This is the same color I used on the seat. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who has subscribed. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Back to my project. I also took a little bit of gold paint and hit the details just to emphasize them a bit more. That was the final step for the paint job. Now I'm moving on to assembly. I like to cut off any obvious burrs and sand pieces smooth. This is the glue I'll be using. It's specifically for gluing polystyrene models. You wouldn't want to use any other type of glue because I'm not sure it would hold. I bought this glue at Ace Hardware for $3, I believe. The glue itself is thick and stringy, but it does the job and holds the pieces together nicely. So I know this seems like a pretty unique and kind of strange craft to do, but I was inspired by a vintage dollhouse chair I owned. I'm not 100% sure where it came from, but it was the same idea. It was a Bond chair with a draped apron and a bowl of green beans sitting on the seat, and it was extremely cute, so I decided to replicate it. You could use an existing chair to do a project like this, but Bond does have different style kits. Now that our chair is done, we're going to move on to the apron portion of this project. This is an apron I already own. It has some garden tools in it. I'll be using this to get an idea of the size I want for my apron. I think this apron is too big for my chair, so I'm tracing it and then I'm drawing a new line inside of the original size to make it smaller. Once I cut out my pattern piece, I realized if I find the center and fold it in half, then I can ensure that each side is symmetrical. I laid my pattern out on my original apron to admire that it is indeed smaller. These are the fabrics I chose from my stash. I'll be using the striped one as the apron body and the little floral one as the pocket. I'm using a Sharpie to make a dotted line around my pattern. I'm using my 1, 2, 3 block to pin my pattern down so it doesn't shift around while I draw. I drew a white line inside of my border so I'll know where my hem is as a guide. Now I'm just freehanding a pocket. I wish I had been paying a bit more attention because I wanted to use this fabric not upside down, but it'll be fine. I'll be hemming my little pocket too, so I'm cutting notches to the white line so when I use my iron to close my seams there won't be any bunching. This is the tool I'll be using to seal my glued seams. It is a really scary thing because your instinct is to put your finger where it gets really hot. So I made this little paper shield to protect myself. I'll rest it on its stand while I begin folding my little hem. Now my iron's hot and very terrifying, so I have it covered with my paper sleeve. Ava Bentley always uses tacky glue, but I'm using this glue called Canopy. This is what I have in an applicator bottle, and I actually really like how this turned out. The glue itself is used by model makers to attach sails to tiny model ships, and it works really well for this purpose. Here you can see where I cut some notches into the bottom of this hem where it curves. I did that so I can follow the curve more easily. Just to give you an overview of this technique, all I'm doing is using the iron to cure the glue instantly, and it holds my hem. This is beneficial because I don't have to sew, because if I did have to sew, you would not catch me making miniature clothing of any kind because I'm terrible at sewing. So this makes this kind of project accessible to people like me who don't sew or can't sew. I've seen Ara from Bentley House Minis make proper dollhouse clothing with real patterns using this technique, so it is really effective. So in this armpit area where the curve's a little tighter, I cut some extra notches. It probably would have helped to cut even more notches than I did. With more notches, I could have gotten the curve to be a little more true to the original, but it looks pretty good. Now it's time to make the strap that goes around the doll's neck for the apron. So I just cut off several stripes and folded it in thirds and ironed it so the folds will hold. Filled it with glue. Then I folded my glued edges back in and gave it a final iron to seal it. I made a guess at an appropriate length and put some glue down, sealed it in place. It is so gratifying to make something like this without sewing. Now it's time to glue my pocket on. At this point, I was feeling pretty pleased with myself, but there's some kind of mystery black stuff on my iron and I scraped it onto my pocket right there. Whoops. Yeah, it's a dirty iron. Make sure your iron is clean or it'll stain your items. So I decided to glue my pocket on 1/2 at a time because I wanted to make it pucker out a little bit and not just be flat to the apron. So when I glued the other side on, I glued the pieces a little closer together. I hope that makes sense. I didn't make enough strap to have 2 straps, and I was too lazy to make another. This will be folded on a chair anyway, so on my chair, the strap is apparently just tucked under, so I only have 1 strap. Since I'm using this apron to make it look like it's draped over a chair with a bowl of green beans sitting on it, I need to manipulate the fabric so it'll hold that shape. So I'm using hot glue for that. Now I'm just attaching it to my chair. I love the versatility of a project like this because if I changed my fabric choice and I changed my contents of my bowl, there's a ton of different ways you could customize this. Now it's time to get to that bowl. The bowl I chose is a vintage metal bowl. I really like how it has this crazing and cracking in the finish. I won't take too much time with the tutorial on how to make the green beans because I'm not that great at making clay food. But essentially I just mixed some greens and yellows together and then I tempered it a bit with some brown clay until it looked like green bean color to me. There's a great technique I've seen where you use a little piece of glass to roll your snakes really evenly, but I don't have a little piece of glass, so I just made kind of messy, uneven snakes. I'm filling the bottom of my bowl with just little clumps of snakes of clay because nobody will see the green beans down there anyway, so I'm just really making an easy and fast way to fill up the space. Here I'm just using magic to cut this into a bunch of pieces really quickly. And then I'm rolling the ends of them and using my finger to flatten them a bit so they look like green beans. Here's my finished bowl of green beans. I used hot glue to glue it to the seat, and then I realized that there was still quite a bit of fabric sticking out at unnatural angles, so I glued the edges of the fabric to make it look like they're hanging straight off of the chair. And spot what I do with this little cutie pie. Thank you so much for watching. I really like how this one turned out.